Hey guys, I'm IzDaisho and I'm here playing some Magic, and today I'm not actually playing, but I am showing and hopefully sharing my knowledge with you. So, first of all, I wanted to thank you guys because last night I played with about 15 to 20 subscribers. I just made a video detailing that I wanted to play with subscribers and that you should just send me a message. So, we did that and I played Peacekeepers all night, and now I think I have a pretty good handle on how to play this deck. I was a little bit hesitant on whether or not I wanted to make this video yet because A, it's still pretty early in the life cycle of the game, and B, I still am a little uncertain on two cards, and it really wasn't my fault because there's really just two slots in this deck that I'm not 100% sure about, and I played about 15, no, not 15, I probably played about 10 games with Windborne Charge in the deck, and I did not draw it once. Two of these guards, two of them, I put them in the deck for 10 games, and I did not draw either of them once. But anyway, so this video is not going to be gameplay. I'm just going to say right now, if I put a gameplay at the end of this video, it would be like 40 minutes long. And I've also if you want to see gameplay, then just go to the 5 videos that I played before, or the 5 videos that I posted before this that are all Peacekeepers gameplay, except for one of them has an Ancient Wilds gameplay thrown in just because I like you guys. And anyway, so this deck is going to be pretty much all talking, so if you don't want to hear me talk for the next 20 minutes, then just click the little X button in the top corner, or maybe the previous page button if you want to go back to your subscribers page, or my videos, or whatever you want to go back to. Anyway, let's get cracking here. So first of all, let's take a look at the top here. I can't point to it, obviously, but anyway, 1 mana, 3 cards. Not great. 2 mana, 10 cards. Alright, that's cute. 3 mana, 11 cards. Alright, that's fine. And then it kind of peters off a little bit. 4 mana, 5 cards. 5 mana, 4 cards. 6 mana, 2 cards. Then, so basically what that tells you is most of your cards you're going to be playing in the early game, and then there's only a few cards in the late game, and in general those cards are really, really powerful, and if you get to play those cards, then you'll do well. You might not win, but it'll be pretty good for you. There's not too many 1-drops, so that means that this deck isn't really hyper aggressive. I really think it's more of a mid-range deck. It's not as fast as Peacekeepers isn't as fast as Peacekeepers. It's not as fast as Exalted, and it's not as fast as Goblins, and it might not even be as fast as Born of Flame if run correctly, but it does do pretty well, and it has nice removal, so it can pretty much beat most decks. It can win any matchup for sure. But anyway, let's and then the 65% creatures, 35% other, basically tells you that this deck is not just, and it's not like all the other spells. Some of the other spells are for your creatures, but it's not just a creatures deck. It's also it has a lot of removal. So it's got about 8 spells that interact with your opponent's creatures, 8 or 9 spells in the deck. So 8 spells out of 36 ball isn't like, or 35 isn't an amazing amount, but it's a pretty high amount of spells that actually interact with your opponent's creatures or permanents. So that is pretty relevant too. So anyway, this deck is really a mid-range deck. It's not like the super aggro deck, and that's all I wanted to get off my chest. Now let's get started. Doom Traveler, 1/1 for 1. When it dies, put a 1/1 spirit token onto the battlefield. This guy's awesome. I mean, he's a great thing to drop turn 1, and the fact that, and like obviously a 1/1 for 1 is not worth it, but he can absorb some damage, and then he just sends his little buddy into the air, and then that guy just does work almost always. There's so few decks that can deal with flyers, and like even the decks that can deal with flyers, sometimes 1 power flyers are good enough. Like, I mean, it kills a Liliana Spectre or like a Firewing Phoenix or something like that, so it's pretty good. Loyal Sentry is also really good. It helps for like playing the Pack Instinct matchup, or even the Ancient Wilds matchup. It like just blocks and kills a Roaring Primadox, or blocks and kills a Timbermaw larva. So this guy's really good. Definitely, I think you should run him. And like, you could still tag with him. I mean, again, he's a 1/1 for 1, so he's obviously not worth it on that end, but he sort of has Death Touch. Anyway, Quarter Paladin was something that I've actually seen a lot of people not run, but here's the reason I run it. First of all, in the matchups where your opponent does not play a lot of creatures, aka Born of Flame or Obedient Dead, which are two really, really strong decks, or in matchups where you're on the play, you drop him, and then they play a spell, and then you're able to remove it, at least for a turn, then this guy gets in for 3 as a 2-drop. That's really good. The fact that he has Battlecry means that he can be a huge threat late game, too, because if you have a whole bunch of creatures out and you just swing with this guy, then he adds like 6 power to the board. So he's really powerful, and the worst he's ever going to do is just, well, actually the worst he's ever going to do is get Flame of the Fire branded with 2 spirit tokens, or 2. It's just like you play this guy, then you play Raise the Alarm, and then he's just like, Flames of Firebrand, die. That's the card in Born of Flame that deals 1 damage to 3 target creatures or players. So, but anyway, this guy is in general just going to trade with someone, so he's not like ever terrible unless he's trading with an opposing Doom Traveler, which is really, really just bad for you. But I don't know, I found him to be successful, and I've also found a lack of 2-drop creatures or spells that add pressure to the board in this deck, so I really wanted to run one, and I like these guys, so they made it in for me. I know that a lot of people don't run it, but I like it. Honor the Pure, let's just bring up this conversation now. May as well, because I'm going to have to toss it in somewhere. But anyway, Honor the Pure, white creatures you control get +1/+1. It's basically the same thing as, I'll get over there in a second, Glorious Anthem, creatures you control get +1/+1, but all the creatures in your deck are white creatures, so Honor the Pure is basically just better Glorious Anthem for this deck. So anyway, I'm just going to refer to this card plus the other 2 Glorious Anthems as Anthems, because that's pretty much what they're called. They give your creatures +1/+1. So anyway, when you play this deck, if you draw one of these Anthems, you're probably going to win. Because against like mid-range decks like Pack Instinct or Ancient Wilds, which is, I guess, more of like a late-game combo deck, then this card is just going to be too fast for them. And you're going to be able to remove their bigger blocking threats with your removal, Journey Nowhere, Pacifism, or whatever. And then Honor the Pure is basically just going to make your guys go insane. So when you play Attended Knight, you add 5 power to the board instead of 3. When you play this card, you add 4 power to the board instead of 2. So it just makes everything you do a lot stronger, and it pretty much guarantees you win the game. If you're playing against one of those matchups with sweepers, Celestial Light, or Born of Flame or Obedient Dead, then you're fine, because you don't have to commit to the board, because one spell, if you play 1 3-drop spell, Attended Knight, and you add 5 power to the board, then that's a huge threat. They have to deal with that right away, so they can't just hold back for sweepers, because you will be able to threaten them with just the spells you have and hold 5 spells in your hand. So when you play these Anthems, you pretty much win the game. I mean, not every time, obviously. Sometimes they have a really good draw, or sometimes just whatever happens, you don't get the right creatures at the right times or the right spells at the right times, and you don't win. But a very, very large majority of the time that you do play these Anthems, you win. So I built the deck to try and win without these cards. Because, as I was saying, you're going to win if you draw these cards, so try to win without drawing these cards. And that's pretty much how I've built the deck. So none of the cards in the deck are relying on these cards to be in the deck. All of them benefit from it, but none of them are really relying on it. Anyway, Journey to Nowhere I mentioned earlier briefly, but when it enters the battlefield, exile a creature. When it leaves the battlefield, return the creature to its owner's control. So rarely does your opponent actually have enchantment removal, but at the very least, this card just removes a creature from combat and then makes them spend their next turn removing this thing. But in general, they don't have enchantment removal, so you're fine. But that's the problem with this deck. All of the removal can be taken away. But anyway, Pacifism is also good. Enchant creature can't attack or block. I run 2 of them just because there is a third here in the sideboard, but I found that as it is, I usually get enough, if not too much, removal, and I definitely don't need more. Pacifism is definitely the weakest one because it doesn't even take it off the board, so if it has an effect or something, then it can still use that effect, so that's no good. Not a happy Daisho. Anyway, Raise the Alarm is good in any situation. It's 2 mana for 2 power, which is not great, but it's fine. I mean, I don't know if I would run a 2/2 for 2 with no abilities. I probably would not, but the fact that it's an instant is really good, and the fact that it's at the 2-drop spot is also really good. So even though it's best when there's an Anthem out, it's still good. It also, since these are soldiers, they work with Captain on the Watch too, so that's a few more Anthems, but, you know, Captain on the Watch is way down the road, so that's not really relevant, but I don't know why I brought it up. Okay, so it's a good card. Sometimes you can ambush people, but pretty much if the white deck is leaving up 2 mana, you know not to swing with your Soul Warden or something like that. Something that you don't want to die. Anyway, Spectral Rider, 2/2 Intimidate for 2 again. 2 drop creatures, so that basically puts 5 2-drop creatures, which is sort of what you want. 6 2-drop spells that you want to be playing on turn 2. So that's okay. And then there's really only 9 spells that you want to be playing turn 2 or prior. So again, that's not really wonderful for an aggro deck, but I just found that Elite Vanguard Ace, as he is called, just doesn't do much. Usually just gets chump blocked and dies. And I know that could be the same for a Quarter Paladin, but a Quarter Paladin I feel like just has so much more upside. Even for the 1 extra mana, it's worth it. But I don't know, I haven't really had too much success with this guy. I feel like he just becomes irrelevant after like turn 2. So I don't know. Maybe, I mean, I wouldn't, if somebody had these in their deck, I wouldn't be like, wow, that guy's a total noob. I can't believe he's running Ace, but I don't know. I don't like him. Anyway, Attended Knight. Very, very good card. 2/2 first strike for 3, which is fine, and then it puts a 1/1 into play. So the 1/1 is always going to help you. This 2/2 first strike is pretty much amazing most of the time. It pretty much it can shut down sides. I've seen that happen where this one card just shuts down a side, and I've also won games with this card. I wish there were 4 of them in this deck, but there's 2 of them, so it's good. Fiend Hunter is amazing. Fiend Hunter is a 1/3, exiles a creature when it enters battlefield, and when it leaves, then they get it back. So you're basically hoping that this guy stays on the battlefield for the whole game, and he's a 1/3, so he kind of like wrecks goblins because most of their removal is just 2 damage, Ember Hauler, Shock, but they do have the Gem Palm Incinerator, I suppose, but hopefully they don't have too many goblins out if you've just Fiend Huntered one. But anyway, this card is really, really strong. A couple of things of note. Never play it against Obedient Dead. I mean, you can play it against Obedient Dead, but never absorb a Blood Hunter Bat or a Liliana Spectre. You're just going to lose insane value because Obedient Dead's going to kill it right away, and then it's just going to, anytime that a card has an Enter the Battlefield effect, once Fiend Hunter leaves, then they get that Enter the Battlefield effect also. If you are playing Obedient Dead, this is just one thing because I've seen it happen and I've heard it happen to somebody. If you are playing Obedient Dead, never use Rise from the Grave on this unless you're like going to be able to win that turn, because if the other guys figure out how to just kill it and make it come back, then they're going to get their Fiend Hunter back, and then they're going to be able to exile something of yours. Because, yeah, anyway. Or even if they just find a Flickerwisp or something like that. But anyway, speaking of Flickerwisp, this card is ridiculous. This card is actually one of the most versatile cards in the game. And you have to run this card. Please just run this card. Try to think out of the box when you're playing with this card because there's so many different things you can do with it. Anyway, first of all, it's a 3/1 flyer for 3, which is fine. Anyway, next, when it enters the battlefield, exile another target permanent. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Okay, first of all, just remove a blocker. Just get him out of there. That's one simple use that you're going to be able to use pretty much every game. Number 2, very rare circumstance, Flickerwisp and Raise the Alarm in hand. You only have 4 mana. You play this guy, exile one of your lands, bring it back, comes back untapped, play Raise the Alarm. You get to play Flickerwisp and Raise the Alarm turn 4. Obviously, that's not going to come up too much, but anyway. Let's say you Fiend Hunter something early game. Let's say you Fiend Hunter, like, a Goblin, an Ember Hauler. Let's say you Fiend Hunter an Ember. No, let's say you Fiend Hunter a Goblin Guide, okay? That's a better example, I think. Then, later, like 2 turns later, obviously, because it's 4-drop, he drops Krenko, Mob Boss. We're playing against the Goblin deck, obviously. Then you're just like, oh no, now I have no more removal for this. So then you're just like, huh, well, if I can play my Flickerwisp, then I can get rid of my Fiend Hunter. He gets his Goblin Guide back, which is now irrelevant in this part of the game. And then I can reassign, and then when my Fiend Hunter comes back into the battlefield at the end step, I can reassign him to eating Krenko. And then you deal with another threat. Let's say one of your guys is pacified. You're playing against some Exalted. They have pacifism there, I think. You just do this, comes back. And then, obviously, the same thing is for O-Rings if you want to just shift targets with them. There's just so many different things that you can do with this card that let's say they, well, I guess Spirit Mantle's not a good idea, not a good example, but if they have any other thing, or let's say let's say you're playing against Crosswinds and they have a whole bunch of 3/3 Drakes out because they have favorable winds, and you have one of your things out, so you have a whole bunch of 2/2s, and you can't deal with it. You're going to die by flying damage next turn. So you swing in for what would be lethal, and they're just like, okay, I'll just block. So they block with their 3/3s on your 2/2s because you have an Anthem out, and they're just like, okay, this is fine. Then you just play Flickerwisp, get rid of their favorable winds, and since all their creatures have taken 2 damage this turn, all of them are just going to go away. So there's not an infinite amount of ways that you can use this, but there's so many ways that you can use this card to your advantage. Make sure you run this card. Try to think out of the box, and I'm sure you guys will be happy. Anyway, we've seen this before. Then there's Guardian's Pledge. Guardian's Pledge is ridiculous. White creatures you control at +2/+2 until end of turn for 3 mana. It's basically Overrun because, I mean, there's no actual evasion because Overrun gives trample. There's no actual evasion, but the fact that it gives white creatures +2/+2 at instant speed basically gives them evasion because they're just like, okay, fine, I can let this through. It's not a big deal. And then you're just like, Guardian's Pledge, win the game. This card, it just always wins you the game. If you have like 3 creatures out, you've won the game when you play this card. It's sort of like an Anthem, and that's why I play it. But anyway, Intrepid Hero, I mean, the times that I've drawn him and he's useful have been very, very, very limited, but I just feel like he's too much of a powerhouse in the late game to actually let him not be in the deck. And the fact that he can just wreck the mono green deck means that I want to keep him in. So I haven't really had too much success with him, too much like actual play testing success with him to say that he's really, really useful. But I like him too much to take him out, so I'm not going to. Oblivion Ring, 2 of these guys. Love this card, so good. It allows me to have enchantment removal and also be able to enchantment and artifact removal, and also have creature removal. So I mean, there are some enchantments in this format that are really, really hard to deal with. Like the other day, somebody played No Mercy against me, and I'm just like, what do I do? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I have O-Ring. That doesn't even matter anymore. No Mercy is in the Exalted deck, and it's whenever a creature deals damage to you, destroy that creature. So it kind of wrecks this deck. But then you have these 2 O-Rings, which just really, really help you out. Very, very good card. Also just creature removal if you need it to be. Dawn Elemental is awesome. He's a 4/4, 3/3 flyer for 4. Prevent all damage that will be dealt to him. So I mean, about now you're going to notice that there is another theme to this deck with Flickerwisp and Spectral Rider and Dawn Elemental. There is actually a decent amount of evasion in this deck, so you can actually swing over them, and often that'll really be how you kill them. Especially since this deck is very good at stalling because it has a whole bunch of 1/1 blockers and stuff. So anyway, Elgon Inquisitor, I know a lot of people don't run it, but I think it's really, really necessary and really, really good. First of all, it's a 2/2 lifelink for 4, which is okay. That's not good, obviously, but it does have lifelink, which is awesome. Then when it dies, you get to put a spirit token onto the battlefield. So then there's 2 of these. There's 2 Doom Travelers, and then there's Mausoleum Guard, who just doesn't have lifelink, but you get to put 2 spirits into the battlefield. So with all those cards, it means that you can still put pressure on the board in those matches where your opponent has sweepers, which is 3 out of the 10 decks, so it does become relevant. Anyway, so there's 3 out of the 10 decks, and you could still play these guys, and then even if they do play a sweeper, then you're fine because you still get the 1/1 spirit out of it, and you just become very, very happy. So very resistant to removal, good against, like, it's also good against Obedient Dead where they want to be trading 1-for-1 even if they don't draw their sweepers, because then it's not really 1-for-1. Especially, I mean, it is a lot better if you do have an Anthem out and it becomes a 3/3 and then your token becomes a 2/2, and the same thing here, it becomes a 3/3 that they don't want to have to deal with because it's not really fun dealing with a 3/3. I mean, very rarely is it fun, and then to deal with 2/2 flyers is just dumb. Odric is ridiculous. When this guy hits the table, you win the game. No, okay, that's not true. I've actually played this guy multiple times and not won. But when you're leading and this guy hits the table, then the game literally just ends. But he's a 3/4 first strike for 4, so obviously he's pretty well costed. And then his ability is extremely relevant. When he attacks and at least 3 other creatures attack, you choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. So if you have 3 other creatures out and they have utility creatures on their side, their utility creatures are just gone because you get to choose how they block. You can just throw 3 1/1s in front of Odric and he just first strike massacres them all with his gigantic ass glowing sword, and then let your other guys go through. And if you want, you don't have to let them block. You basically become them for a half a turn. It's like Mindslaver, which is just ridiculous. I mean, it's so strong. Obviously, you guys aren't gonna take it out. But anyway, Archon of Justice is where I was talking about. These two cards I've had in, I've had out. I haven't had too much success with them. I haven't had too much failures with them. The deck that I'm running now is 60 cards and 25 lands. So I feel like... So that's already one too many. Generally, you want 24 lands if you have a 60 card deck. So I feel like I need to have some stuff at the top of the curve. If I didn't have this, then it would just be 2 5-drops and 2 6-drops. So it's really not too many. These guys are pretty well costed. They're 5-cost 4/4 flyers, and they're very resistant to removal, because if they do remove them, then I get to exile target permanent. So that's awesome. Becomes an amazing blocker. If your opponent's ahead, then you just drop this guy there, and they're like, I don't know what to do now, because now if I swing in, then he's just going to block and then kill one of my bigger guys. So that's terrible for them. So I like Archon of Justice on paper. I like it in the curve, and I also like the fact that it's a 4/4 flyer, so it does give you that extra evasion boost. So I really do like this card in the last 2 slots of this deck, but I mean, I'm willing to listen to any other arguments. I have tried multiple different cards in the deck, and I haven't had too much success with any of them. So we're almost done with this deck, but then we still need to go to the sideboard and see what I did not play. Anyway, Geisthonored Monk is amazing. Vigilance, Geisthonored Monk is power times this creature you control, so he comes in at least a 3/3, usually more, but in general, you're going to have like a 7/7 Vigilance, and it's going to be amazing for you. When it enters the battlefield, put 2 1/1 flyers onto the battlefield, so that's awesome. Then there's Captain of the Watch, who is a 3/3 Vigilance. Other soldiers get +1/+1 in Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, put 3 dudes out. So it's really strong. The problem is there's a lot of creatures that are not soldiers in this deck. First of all, guy's an Archon. Second of all, Human Monk. This guy's actually a soldier. Human Scout, Human Cleric, just Elemental. This guy is a soldier, I believe. Obviously, it's just like an Elemental or whatever that thing is. This guy's a Human Cleric. This one is a Human Knight, Spirit Knight. So again, these guys do build soldiers, but this guy is a Knight also as well, soldier, and then soldier. So there's just a lot of non-soldiers in this deck, especially the way I have it set up. But even so, Captain of the Watch just does work by itself, and I mean, just drop this card and they have to deal with it right away. So it's really strong. So anyway, that's it for the deck. This is how I run my deck. I'm not saying that it's the perfect way or that it's the only way to run this deck. It's definitely not the only way. There's definitely another way to run this deck that is very successful, but I just choose not to run it that way. Anyway, we've talked about Ace a little bit. Master Decoy. This guy is somebody who I want to spend a little bit of time on. So he's a 2-cost 1/2 tap target creature. So in general, for a tapper, you want it to be 1-drop. So that's the first thing that Master Decoy has not going for him. Second thing is, you really want to curve out with this deck. You want to be playing 2-drops and 3-drops and 4-drops, and then you want to be playing a 3-drop and a 2-drop. So you want to be spending all your mana every turn, and then this guy basically just slows you down. So that's no fun. Additionally, I'm not even sure if tappers are good enough for this format. So in limited formats, like when you play draft decks or sealed decks or something like that, tappers are insane, and they're, if not first pickable, easily second pickable. They're very strong cards. And then in standard, nobody plays tappers. Like, nobody even thinks of playing a tapper. It's just not strong enough. And I feel like Duels of Planeswalkers is somewhere in the middle, because it's got some ridiculously broken cards, and then there's also the fact that you're limited to whatever cards that they give you. So I'm not really sure where it falls in on whether tappers are good or not. That, plus the fact that this guy costs an extra mana, and you want to be using all your mana every turn, means that I'm not really a fan. The thing that really clinched it for me, though, is the fact that with all the pacifisms, Journey to Nowheres, Oblivion Rings, Fiend Hunters, you have enough removal. You don't need any more. So I didn't include them. I did have them in one build, but I chose not to include them. Pacifism I mentioned earlier, why I don't have it. Ring of Thune. This is one of those cards that, like, you can't sleep on it, because if you just put this ring on a flyer, then after 3 turns it just becomes a Serra Angel, and it just becomes ridiculous. But the fact that they can do so much to just disrupt your creatures, like they can just kill your creatures after a couple turns, they can just bounce your creatures after a couple turns, means that I really don't think it's worth playing a card. So I don't run it. Squadron Hawk, there's 2 of them. Why are there not 4 of them? I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. But you don't want to play a 2-cost 1/1 flyer. He does get you another 1/1 flyer, but okay, so since there's 2 of them, it's not unreasonable to be playing them. If there were 3, it would be probably playing them, and if there were 4, I would definitely be running them, but with just 2, I don't think I really can, so I'm not going to. Crusader of Odric. Alright, so a lot of people like this card, and it's a pretty strong card. The thing that I don't like about it is, if you top deck it late game by itself, it's terrible. And that's not really what you want for a 3-drop. Like, let's take a look at the other 3-drops in this deck. I haven't even done this before, so I could be taking a huge risk right here. Attended Knight is good late game. This guy is good late game top deck because they'll just get rid of someone. But anyway, Attended Knight can either just stall a board if they have two toughness guys, or if you have an Anthem, then it just adds 5 power to the board. It's ridiculous. Flickerwisp is great, always. I spent like an hour talking about Flickerwisp. Anyway, Intrepid Hero is good to top deck late game. And then those are all the 3-drop creatures. So all of them are good by themselves, which is not really the case for Crusader of Odric. You need other creatures out to do well. And since I don't run... I mean, the real reason why I'm not running Crusader of Odric is because I'm not running any of these. And the reason why I don't run any of these is because I want to win the game without needing anthems. And Captain's Call is only good... Well, okay, that's not even true. I can't even say that. It's best when there's an anthem out. It works well with this guy, it works well with Geisar Monk, it works alright with Odric as well. So all those 3 cards make you sort of want to play it, but I just don't think... So since there's so many good cards that I can run in this deck, I had to make a cut, and the cut that I decided to make was to cut one of the synergies out of the deck, which was the Crusader of Odric Captain's Call synergy. So you can hate me if you want. You can say that Captain's Call has won you a billion games. I know it has, but I'm just going to say that the anthems have really won you those games, and that Captain's Call was unneeded. You could have run other cards, and you would have still been fine. Midnight Guard is cool, but he's just not good enough. I mean, he's an okay card in draft, but he's not good enough for this format. This guy I've tried, and he's alright, but I mean, the 1 toughness kind of hurts. Just gets destroyed by a lot of stuff, but he does have first strike and vigilance, which is cute. He's very patrolly, but it's 3 mana for a 2 for